And I think that's actual really interesting point you just brought up, is that a lot of times we have a conversation about unemployment rates.
Yeah.
Unemployment rate, obviously, in the United States right now is extremely low, which is a good and a bad thing, because a lot of the data is kind of skewed in the way because it's talking about employment, but not necessarily how much money you're making out of the jobs.
Right.
But at the same time, it blows my mind to think that there's 173,000 jobs available right now in the market that is needed, like necessarily needed in these companies.
And that's just warehouse pickers.
Yeah, that's just warehouse pickers.
Just like,
and because the question usually comes with technology and especially automation, it is a very scary subject matter, because it is going to displace a lot of jobs.
Yeah,
it really will, especially in retail stores in general. Like,
yeah,
it's going to really take away jobs, which is one thing why universal basic income is the thing in these conversations. But the other side of the equation, what a lot of people don't think about, is a human can only do a certain amount of tasks, and then they're only efficient to a certain extent.
Right.
Robotics, if it's to benefit the worker as a tool, is huge.
Yeah.
But when it replaces, I think that's where the problem is. But if it's used as a tool, I think that's where it's here to benefit society, not necessarily impact it.
And that's cool, because that's the culture of new age robotics. Whereas a couple years back, there was a trauma in with manufacturing companies taking on automation, because older automation companies promised them the world of substituting all this labor, being able to do all the work themselves, and then they ended up executing on poor products that didn't have an ROI, and so you had a lot of manufacturing companies get traumatized by these promises that they've made. But with new age automation, I feel like the companies are a lot more aware that a company's greatest asset is its workforce. And what we should be aiming to do is not replace the workforce. What we should be aiming to do is augmenting them, making their jobs easier and faster to do, so that we can get more goods basically being delivered faster and cheaper for everyone else that purchases them.
I mean, the other thing to consider, though, and I think this is one thing that as ARCs later down the line, not necessarily at this point where you're at, but you have to consider, is the sustainability side as well. When it comes to how supply chain logistics and how it's evolving and how quickly, like one day shipping, and how that really impacts, for example, climate change and all these issues, because the amount of packages that are now getting pushed out, the amount of carbon footprint that's created with the boxes and all these things. So I think efficiency is good, but I think the one thing that also needs to be thought about is, how do we make it more sustainable process from the start to the finish? How do we reduce the carbon footprint? How do we reduce how fast it, like, if the speed's fine, but what is the repercussions of that? And I think that's one thing that has to be explored when it comes to the supply chain world in general.
And I don't think that for later down the line, I think we have these conversations from the beginning, because we need to know how we're gonna move towards that new age. So luckily, like, we grew up in an age where we grew up in the recession. And I think there was a shift from the older generation to our generation, where the older generation is like, okay, let's make a business to make profit and just have a better lifestyle, make money. And our generation of entrepreneurs is more like, okay, well, let's make a lot of money to work on bigger projects that will help impact the world. So it's nice to be part of that, and be able to worry about the environment, because that's a privilege that we have, just because we're raised in the right time, and that we can impact that. That's definitely. Do
you have anything else to add to that, Oscar?
I mean, so like we're already making small decisions here and there. But like one thing that we're conscious of is that, like, since we have a robot, we need a lot of electricity. But like our engineers have definitely talked about like ways of repurposing the electricity that we're already using, or like ways of recharging our batteries without having to plug it into the wall.